Today we're going to be studying from Matthew chapter 27. Now when morning had come, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him up to Pilate the governor. Then when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that he had been condemned, he felt remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, What is that to us? See to that yourself. And he threw the pieces of silver into the sanctuary and departed, and he went away and hanged himself. Again, I've talked about this before. If Judas only trusted in the goodness of God and his mercies, he would know that Jesus would have forgiven him if he had godly sorrow that led to repentance. But he has worldly sorrow. Worldly sorrow does not give us salvation. It takes away. He fell right into the hands of the evil one. That's what the evil one wants to do. Steal, kill, and destroy. Well, he took his own life when he didn't need to. He could have had genuine godly sorrow, but he didn't trust who Jesus was. He really didn't know Jesus. And of course, Jesus knew from the very beginning who was going to betray him, who really didn't have the Spirit of God in him. Even though Jesus used Judas to do miracles, to raise the dead, to heal the sick when he was going out 2 by 2, Judas didn't have the right kind of heart. He ended up stealing from the money that he was put over in charge of the money bag, and he would take money from it. There were things that he was doing from the very beginning that was not good. And Jesus knew, but he still loved him just as much as he did all the others. There was nothing that the other 11 could have said that they would have known that Judas was being treated differently because he was going to be the one to betray Jesus. Jesus knew, but he loved them all the same. And that's where it said, even up till the very end, that Jesus showed his love for Judas by washing his feet, by calling him friend when he was coming to betray him with a kiss. What more could Jesus have done to try to show Judas that he loved him and that he wanted him to be saved? But he allowed Judas to choose. And unfortunately, here, Judas listened to the evil one. He made the wrong choice. Verse 6. And the chief priests took the pieces of silver and said, It is not lawful to put them into the temple treasury, since it is the price of blood. And they counseled together, and with the money bought the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. You can look at Zechariah chapter 11, verses 12 and 13 to see that this matches up with what a prophecy said, and that from hundreds of years ago before this actually happened. Verse 8. For this reason that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one whose price had been set by the sons of Israel. That comes from Jeremiah 32, 6 through 9. And again, Zechariah 11, 12, and 13 has a part of it. Verse 10, And they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. So all that is part of the quote. I kind of stopped at the end of 9, but that 9 and 10 is all the quote from Jeremiah in verses 32, 6 through 9. Okay, now picking up in 27:11. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor questioned him, saying, Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said to him, It is as you say. Again, the governor is Pontius Pilate. He is the one that has been chosen to be the governor at this time. And I believe that because his wife has a dream about Jesus, because he tries to help Jesus get off of this death sentence, I really think there's a part of him that believes Jesus is this holy man and could be the Son of God. And I think he has a kind of fear about doing anything to harm this man. Okay, verse 12. And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no answer. So Jesus wouldn't answer the chief priests and the elders, but he did answer Pilate. Then Pilate said to him, Do you not hear how many things they testify against you? And he did not answer him with regard to even a single charge, so that the governor was quite amazed. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the multitude any one prisoner whom they wanted. So this was something that every Passover, it was a custom in the Roman, when the Roman governor came and he was there for this Passover, he would allow them to decide which prisoner they would allow to be, that he would release. He would give them a pardon, just like what we do. Sometimes our president today will do that. Verse 16. And they were holding at that time a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. When therefore they were gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" Now, I think Pilate was thinking that they were going to choose Jesus, but they don't. Verse 18. For he knew that because of envy they had delivered Jesus up. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, "Have nothing to do with this righteous man, for last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him." Okay, she is a practicing Jew. Okay, verse 20. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes to ask for Barabbas and to put Jesus to death. So the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes who had just earlier in the week, 5 days earlier, said, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." I believe that included some of them, not all of them, but some of them had turned on Jesus. And how would the chief priests and the elders persuade the crowd to do this? I think that they might have, and again, this is all my thinking, there's no proof of this, but they had beaten Jesus already. They had slapped him, punched him when he had come to Caiaphas, and the temple guards were there. So Jesus was already beaten up. And I think that they probably said, "Hey, look, if this really was the Messiah, do you really think the king who would deliver us from our enemies would be beaten up like this? This guy's a fraud." I really think that that's part of what they were able to do to try to convince the crowd that Jesus wasn't who he said he was. Okay, verse 21. But the governor answered and said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." He couldn't get them to change their mind. He's trying. Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." Oh. And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they kept shouting all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." And when Pilate saw that he was accomplishing nothing, but rather that a riot was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the multitude, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to that yourselves." So he's giving his approval here. Now, in one of the other gospel accounts, it says that if you're no friend of Caesar, if you let this man who calls himself a king go, because Caesar's king, and you're going to let this guy who's a fraud get away with calling himself a king when only Caesar should be king. So I think there was a little bit of fear there, too, as to why Pilate listened to the crowd. He didn't really want to listen to them, but he was afraid that the people would tattletale on him to Caesar, and he didn't want any kind of charges against him, but he also didn't want Jesus's blood on his hands. So he thought if he just did this whole thing of washing his hands in front of them and saying he's innocent, that would absolve him. And the people listen to what they answer. And this is a preview of something where I believe Jesus had warned them about no stone would be left on the other, and about the temple, and that the Roman army would destroy Israel and the temple. Well, I think it's because they responded after Pilate says, "I'm innocent of this man's blood." Look at what verse 25 says. And all the people answered and said, "His blood be on us and on our children." They just put the curse on themselves. They're saying, "God, you punish us if we're wrong," basically. If this really is the Son of God, they're guilty now. They're saying, "Let his blood be on us." Well, Jesus took them up on that. They're going to be punished in 70 AD. Two-thirds, they think, up to two-thirds of the Jews were killed. The temple was destroyed, and they were scattered. Okay, verse 26. Then he released Barabbas for them, but after having Jesus scourged So here he is getting beat up again. He would have been whipped, and it would have been terrible because it was a whip that had like bones on the end, like these teeth on it that were made out of bones, and it would just rip the flesh. And a lot of times they'd whip somebody like 39 times, 40 minus 1. It doesn't tell us how many, but he was really beaten up and just bloody and unrecognizable, it says in Isaiah 53, after all this that they've done to him. And it said that they pulled out his beard. I mean, he went through so much abuse. It just breaks my heart to think of what they did to Jesus. So, but it says, but after having Jesus scourged, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole Roman cohort around him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Now they're going to be mocking him. And after weaving a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand, and they kneeled down before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Well, you know what? For real, one day they will do it. That every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord when he returns. They're not going to be mocking him then. Verse 30. And they spat on him and took the reed and began to beat him on the head. And after they had mocked him, they took his robe off and put his garments back on and led him away to crucify him. And as they were coming out, they found a man of Cyrene named Simon, who they pressed into service to bear his cross. Yeah, I'm guessing that Jesus tried to carry his cross, and he was so weakened by all the beating and everything and all the blood that he's lost that he just couldn't carry that cross. So they made this man, Simon, who was coming by that day, be the one to carry Jesus' cross to Golgotha. Okay, verse 33. And when they had come to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they gave him wine to drink mingled with gall, and after tasting it, he was unwilling to drink. This was to fulfill Psalm 69, verse 21. You can see that that's part of what is said, a prophecy about Jesus, that they will be offering him this. Verse 35. And when they had crucified him, they divided up his garments among themselves, casting lots. That's another prophecy that was fulfilled, Psalm 22:18. And sitting down, they began to keep watch over him there. And they put up above his head the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Now, the Pharisees are going to have a big problem with this. They come to Pilate, because Pilate was the one that ordered that the sign be put over Jesus as he was being crucified. They come to Pilate and say, "Hey, don't put that sign over him that's saying that he's the King of the Jews. I want you to write down he says he's the King of the Jews." And Pilate says, "Nope, it is written I've written what I wrote." And so that again makes me wonder if Pilate didn't somewhat believe who Jesus was. Verse 38. At that time 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left, and those passing by were hurling abuse at him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." Again, mocking him, not believing in him. Jesus didn't revile back. He didn't say any nasty words back. It says that again, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly in 1 Peter 2:18 through 26, somewhere around in there. Okay, verse 41. In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him and saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Him now come down from the cross, and we shall believe in him." So they're trying to tempt him to try to prove, same thing that Satan did. And what did Jesus quote? "Do not put the Lord your God to the test." Yeah, you know what? The angels could have rescued him. Not, the devil was quoting Psalm 91 about, "Hey, jump off of here and prove to me that you're the Son of God," because it says in Psalm 91 that the angels will lift you up and know your foot can't be struck against the stone. But what was Jesus' answer to Satan? "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Jesus is not going to allow himself to sin after going through all this abuse by trying to prove to them that he really is the Son of God. Okay. And even if he had gotten himself off of the cross, they still would find a reason not to believe in him, because when people don't want to believe in something, they come up with any excuse, whether it's something far-fetched or not, and they believe these lies that Satan puts in their thoughts. Okay, verse 43. He trusts in God, let him deliver him now, if he takes pleasure in him, for he said, I am the Son of God. So he's like, hey, if the Father's going to take pleasure in his son, he should deliver him. But again, God's not going to listen to them. He doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. He knows what his plan is, and the plan is going to be carried out. And Jesus is willing, even though it's a terrible thing that he's having to go through. He's entrusting himself to his Father. Verse 44. And the robbers also who had been crucified with him were casting the same insult at him. Now from the 6th hour, darkness fell upon all the land until the 9th hour. So that would be from 12 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A darkness came upon all the people. Verse 46. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, or Tani, or something like that. I know I'm not saying it right. That is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And he's quoting Psalm 22, verse 1. And some of those who were standing there when they heard it began saying, This man is calling for Elijah. And immediately one of them ran, and taking a sponge, he filled it with sour wine and put it on a reed and gave him a drink. Again, part of the fulfillment of Psalm 69, verse 21, about the wine vinegar type thing, trying to offer that to him. Okay, verse 49. But the rest of them said, Let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and yielding up his spirit. What did he say when he yielded up his spirit? We're not told in this account, but we've got two things. We've got John's account telling us it is finished. We got Luke 23:46 that says, Into your hands I commit my spirit. Okay, so either one of those things, which probably, maybe he said those were the two last things that he said. Probably it is finished was the final one. Verse 51. And behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. Big earthquake. Just like when Jesus returns, it says that there's going to be this huge earthquake, unlike any other earthquake before. This one wasn't as bad as the final one's going to be, but it was bad. The rocks were split. The earth shook. It even tore the temple veil. And that temple veil is got 4 inches thick of material. So it wouldn't just split all by itself. Okay, verse 52. And the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Now, this is a really curious thing that we're only told in the Gospel of Matthew happened when Jesus died, that from this earthquake, some of the bodies of the saints that had been dead came and were walking around. They were seen by a lot of people. They were raised. I will often wondered if these are the 24 that are sitting on thrones in the book of Revelation, chapter 4, where it says that there's 24 of the elders that are sitting on these thrones and they're worshiping God, and then Jesus comes out. And so I don't know that for sure, but I've often wondered if maybe these 24 weren't the ones that got to be raised along with Jesus when he went up to heaven. He took them with him, and they were actually raised in their spiritual bodies, just like we will get a resurrection when Jesus returns. Maybe they got it when Jesus was, raised on the 3rd day. I don't know. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. So a lot of people saw these saints that were resurrected or were raised. Now, were they raised in a way that they walked the earth from that time forward until they died again like Lazarus? Or did they get a new glorified body when Jesus went up to heaven, that he took them with him? Again, I don't really know. It's all speculation. Okay, verse 54. Now the centurion and those who were with him, keeping guard over Jesus, when they saw the earthquake and the things that were happening, became very frightened and said, Truly, this was the Son of God. So this centurion and some of them that were with him actually start saying, hey, I really do believe now. Now, with everything that just happened, I think he really was the Son of God. And many women were there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. So Jesus had this whole group of women that would support him. In Luke 8, verse 3, it says that Mary Magdalene, Joanna, some of the women that were prominent would help support with their own money Jesus' ministry. So I think a lot of these women that were at that distance watching all this were some of those same women that had been so close following Jesus during his ministry. Okay, verse 56, among whom was Mary Magdalene, along with Mary, the mother of James, and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Now, some think that Salome, which was Mary's sister, the son, that is the mother of Zebedee's sons, James and John. I don't know that for sure, but they kind of put that together from putting these verses in John 19:25, Mark 15:40, 47, Mark 16:1 together. Again, that's some scholars will say that. Verse 57, and when it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. Now, this Joseph is actually a Pharisee that is believing, and we know Nicodemus was a Pharisee that was believing in Jesus, but he came in the middle of the night to talk to Jesus because he knew that the Pharisees would put out anybody that believed in Jesus. So he did it secretly. Up until this point, Joseph had worshiped Jesus secretly as well. But by doing this, by going to Pilate and asking for Jesus's body, it's coming out in the open that he is a believer in Jesus. And so he had to finally make a stand and quit being scared and start being more courageous and take a stand for what he believed in, and he did. Verse 58, this man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given over to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock, and he rolled a large stone against the entrance of the tomb and went away. So this was his own tomb that he had bought for himself, but he wanted to honor Jesus with it. He put Jesus's body in there and then had a big rock rolled in front of it. My guess is probably would have taken maybe a couple men to help him do this, and we know in John's account that Nicodemus is actually with him at this point too, so maybe between the two of them they were able to do that. Okay, verse 61, and Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite the grave. Now on the next day, which would have been a Friday, which is the one after the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together with Pilate and said, sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I am to rise again. So this again is the second day. We have in our churches, everybody saying that Jesus was crucified on a Friday, but it actually would have been our Thursday that he was crucified. And it's now the next day. This is Friday. And a Sabbath is about to come. So we know that Sabbath starts in the evening of Friday and it goes until the evening of Saturday. So they're needing to get the stuff, make sure that everything's done. And that's why the women couldn't come and anoint his body, because they had preparation day. They had to get their food ready for the Sabbath. They would have been too busy to come and anoint his body. They're going to have to wait till after the special Sabbath was over and the Sabbath. Friday was a special Sabbath because that was the 15th day of the Passover, and it was supposed to be kept as a special Sabbath. Or is that the 14th? Well, whatever day that was a special Sabbath that day. There were going to be 2 Sabbaths in a row because of the special Sabbath. Okay, verse 64. Therefore give orders for the grave to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest the disciples come and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead. And the last deception will be worse than the first. So they're saying, hey, if people think that he's raised from the dead, more people will start following after him than what followed after him when he was alive. So this would be worse if they end up like having his body removed. If they do that, then people are going to believe this lie, and more people are going to come to faith than even when he was walking the earth. Okay, verse 65. Pilate said to them, "You have a guard, go make it as secure as you know how." So he's saying, look, you can do whatever you want, put your guard out there. I'm not going to give you somebody, but you can put your own guards out there and make sure that the grave is secure. That's kind of like it's your problem, not mine. Verse 66. And they went and made the grave secure, and along with the guard they set a seal on the stone. So a seal would have been showing whether or not somebody tried to break into it. If somebody removes the rock, the seal is going to be broken. So we're going to see on chapter 28 him rising from the dead, but this is what they've done now to try to make sure that there's no rising from the dead that's going to be able to be done, because they're guarding it. They've got the seal on there, but we know that nothing can stop God when he wants to do something.